That's what I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do here, when you're shooting, and the way we're going to do this, by the way, is that each of you, we're going to look at your camera and figure out how to put it on just complete auto settings. I want the camera to be the thing that's making all the decisions except for you making a decision what's in that viewfinder. All right? So we're going to put our cameras on automatic settings. You're going to be looking through that viewfinder, and of course, because you're a human being, you see things in color. You cannot see the world in black and white. Right? I mean, we can kind of squint and see things a little bit in black and white because we take away some of the color information, but not so much in such a way that we can completely get rid of all of it. So when we are going and taking our photographs, there are some things that I want you to think about as you're looking through that viewfinder to make a decision as to whether or not that's going to be a good photograph once it gets converted to black and white. All right, so when it comes to black and white, the images that are always going to look the best is where you have a good range of values happening within the image. Some really nice bright white areas, some really nice dark areas that could be pure black, and maybe a little representative of all the values in between. What does not look particularly great is an image where just about everything is going to be gray once you convert it. So, like in an image like this, right? I'm looking at it in color, but I look at it and I can say to myself, well, this guy's shirt is pretty bright. And in fact, it looks pretty white on the screen up there. On my screen, it's more green in color, not unlike his pants. All right? And I got some areas that are really nice and dark. And then I've got some, even in the areas that are going to be gray, there's a shift in value, right? There's the darker greens of the shadows of the waves and the brighter areas where it's catching the sunlight, right? But I got to try my damnedest not to think about color and just think about the light and the shadow. And I can look at this one and say, yeah, you know what? This will make for a good black and white image. I can see some things that might be a little tricky, like the fact that this girl's sunglasses and her hair, right? It stands that earpiece stands out really nicely from her hair in color because it's this bright kind of pinkish red, and her hair is more brown, right? But if you think about that value and that value, they're not that different from one another. And when that converts to black and white, this probably won't stand out as nicely from that. And if I'm going to want that, that'll be something I'll have to deal with in editing. This is an image that can maybe, but might not, because there's a lot of values that are very similar. At the very least, if it's going to work in black and white, I'm going to have to do a lot of work in editing. Because maybe I've got a couple of spots that get really dark, like in there. Some areas that are particularly bright, not really. The sand is, I could maybe try to push toward white, but if I push it toward white, are these stones back here going to also get super bright? In which case, can I get the kind of the kind of contrast I want with the shadows? I'm not sure. But still, if I were taking this image, I might still go ahead with it because there are some areas that maybe I could push toward white, some areas I can push toward black. I'm just not sure if all this gray is going to come across really well. And same there. Although there's a little more to play around with because there's the sky, which is going to be pretty bright for the most part, except up here. The water is a different value from the sky. This gray is a different value from the water. And the sand stands out nicely from the gray where, come on, go back. Where there, the sand is standing out somewhat, but not quite as nicely as it is there. So that's one I could see potentially working in black and white. Maybe, maybe not. There's some interesting areas I could push super dark. Right? There's some areas I could push super bright, but is there enough of a contrast between that and this? Hard to say. There's one where most of it's going to kind of fall toward the darker side. And I'd be hard pressed, although I know right here on your screen it looks super bright. On my screen, it's not as bright right there as it is on yours. But if I start playing with this, am I going to get the right amount of contrast between this guy here and the ground he's standing on? He's going to stand out nicely from the water. This guy's standing out nicely from the water here, but are all these ripples going to show up as well as I hope they will in black and white? That might take a little editing to work. That's probably not the greatest photo to try to do in black and white. There's not much happening in the way of values. I'm going to be really hard pressed to get this pole to stand out from the sky because the sky isn't particularly bright. These flags might stand out from what's immediately around them, right? But there's not a good pure white. And even though this looks really dark up there, it's not as dark on my screen. There's not a good dark. So that any area that I'm going to try to, let's say if I were to try to edit this in black and white and push those clouds toward white to get them brightened, that could have an effect on some other areas that I don't want to brighten. If I try to push where you can make out this pole against the sky, am I going to be cranking up my contrast too much so that I lose a lot of detail that I would like to keep? That would be a great one for black and white because there's all this cool like texture that's happening here. Another thing that will always look good in black and white is if you've got really good, interesting, and in-focus texture. Because the light hits the high points, the shadows are cast in the deeper points, and you can get a really cool sense of that texture once you start amping your contrast. And then all these black, or what will be eventually black branches up here against a lighter, not perfectly white, but a lighter sky. This could be a really interesting image in black and white. This is a bit on the gray side, but I see the potential of it because I've got little areas that can be pushed toward black and little areas that can be pushed toward white. But I don't know. Will the grays in between become a problem? It's hard to say. So things to look out for as you're working. Or rather, things to look for. Think about your light. Where's your light coming from? And is it giving you an interesting sense of the form of what you're looking at, right? So here the sun was coming from very strongly over here on the left side, which gives me this nice bright area on this side of the building and a dark area on this side of the building. One of the problematic things about shooting inside is that lights are meant to give a diffuse light and not dramatic lighting from one side. So if there's any way you could control that lighting, go for it. Or if the light seems to be casting interesting shadows, look at that kind of thing. Where the light is too diffuse and it's not giving you a good directional light source, then as you're looking through that viewfinder, I want you to think about, is what I'm seeing here, or does what I'm seeing here have a good value range from some nice bright whites to some nice dark darks and some grays in between, or does everything sort of feel like it would fall into the same grayness? And understand, as you're taking these photographs, you may encounter a situation where something's got a really nice, bright, brilliant color so that it stands out from everything around it. And you'll be thinking, ooh, that's going to look great. Let me snap a picture of that. What I want you to do is, as much as you can, try to ignore the color information. Right? This super bright red that has behind it, I don't know, a sort of medium-ish brown, maybe that red thing's not going to stand out as nicely as you thought it would once it's converted to black and white. All right? Questions about that? All right, so what I want you guys to do is on your desktop of your computer, I want you to right-click, go down to New, and then to Folder, to create a new folder. And you can title that folder rather, Photography or Art 351 or whatever you need to call it so that you know that it's for this class. And then open that folder. And within it, I want you to right-click. Hang on, my SD card's opening. Right-click. Go to New again. go to folder. And the folder you create, this time I want you to call assignment 1 within your photography folder. All right, then open that folder. I've got photos in here already, you do not. Then whatever means you have of transferring photographs, open it up as well. And then start clicking on the photographs you want. Drag them on in here into this. I don't want to replace it, so no. Let me grab the one I took of the classroom while I was just pointing my camera randomly. All right? Get those photographs into that folder you've just created. And that'll be enough for today.